Great. Well, welcome to another episode of the RJ webinar series. Thank you for joining us today. We'll start by, well, first of all, asking you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the work that you do, where you are, and what brought you to restorative justice.
Great. So my name is Jaremko Bromwich, and I'm a Canadian lawyer and mediator. And I also teach at Carleton University in Ottawa, Ontario. I also do work with the Law Society of Nunavut. Nunavut is our, and I'll talk more about Nunavut, but it is an Inuit territory. And it is a very, very large physical space, and it is in the Arctic. And so the work I've done research with respect to restorative justice, and I also have worked as a Crown and dealt with restorative justice in the Crown prosecutor and dealt with restorative justice in a practical way that way. And I have also worked in my research, I'm very interested in law and technology and have worked with the Canadian Association of Radiologists working group. And there's a massive amount of innovation happening with respect to medicine and technology, specifically relating to Canada's north. And so now I'm doing work in the north from a legal perspective and working on access to justice issues, and really in the context of Canada's imperative to Indigenous reconciliation, our really troubled and problematic history with Indigenous peoples and the generational trauma, and the fact that this is an Indigenous territory. There is a really significant need for restorative justice. And so bringing those threads together, I thought it would make sense to look at the ways technology and artificial intelligence can support the use of restorative justice.
Brilliant. Well, it's fantastic to have you here. And here is the proof well, I love Niels Christie, by the way, bless him. When he said that restorative justice is all about taking the conflict away from the lawyers. Here are two lawyers advocating for restorative justice, right? So things do change 30 years later. But it's good to have your perspective on this topic, Rebecca. And what fascinated me was the blog that you wrote. I think it was during RJ Week.
Yes.
Which, as you know, takes place every November, and it was a Canadian initiative, but obviously now is an international initiative. And I look at your blog, and you were writing about artificial intelligence or AI and how this can be used for to support restorative justice. And I thought, oh my God, this I've never seen anything like this before. Nobody's written about it, and what an exciting opportunity. Because we know there is a lot of barriers when you implement restorative justice. We also know that now there's a lot more online restorative justice. So the kind of traditional way of putting people together in a room and obviously using those dynamics are slightly changing. And that's why I think we need to get people to start thinking about this. So how did it all start? How did it all go about? I mean, what brought you to this topic? I mean, how did you start thinking about it and then writing about it, AI and restorative justice?
Okay, well, I mentioned briefly, I have done some research with the Canadian Association of Radiologists with respect to uses of AI, with respect to imaging and medical technology. And so that's one thread, and so learning a little bit about AI from that perspective, from people who are scientists and know more about it than me, and then looking at the needs Canada has with respect to a need for new initiatives, for ways to bring about justice, for ways to support restorative justice, particularly with respect to Indigenous populations, Inuit populations in Canada's north. And the practical reality of the situation in Nunavut is it's a massive landmass. It makes up 1/3 of Canada's geographical territory. So it's this huge landmass. It is the least dense population in any territory in the world, and it is the farthest north. The world's farthest north legal clinic is in Nunavut. So we're dealing with a marginal northern environment where travel is difficult, where the population is spread out, and where law has to be conducted in a variety of innovative ways that are supported by technology anyway. So we're looking at a space where there are challenges, and challenges are always also opportunities, right? So putting those pieces together and thinking about ways, and the third source of my thinking here is with the pandemic, Canada's courts in the south. So most of Canada's cities are located within 200 kilometers of the US border. We are generally sort of spread along the US border. The work I'm doing now is predominantly in the north, where we have a far less dense population, but these are citizens of our country and they are entitled to all the benefits of being such, right? So to think about our particular challenges and that geographical the way people are so spread out over massive land mass, and how can people be connected, and how can we make justice meaningful? And in the context of the pandemic, the Southern courts started using online proceedings, and there had been massive resistance to using technologies like Skype and Zoom. We tend to use Zoom more in Canada, and Teams and other platforms, but now we're doing it and it works, right? So thinking about the ways in which we could go beyond simply having, a Zoom conversation, and use technology to really support people hearing and understanding each other. And also thinking through, AI can also do simulation, right? So AI can kind of dispense with some of the time it takes, some of the paperwork it takes. It can enable people to be brought together, and it can allow for simulation or interaction that doesn't necessarily involve risky conflict-inducing interactions with one another. There can be kind of practice. So there's a lot there. Yeah.
I have two questions. This is fascinating, and I'm sure the challenges that you mentioned. I think other countries resonate with some of the things that you're saying, particularly around minority groups, the issue of language barriers and cultural barriers and all those sort of things. But I have a question, and then I think I want to challenge you a little bit about how you use this. But just somebody who doesn't know much about AI, and I don't know much about AI. I haven't used AI, to be honest, yet, but I want to look into it. I'm quite old-fashioned, but just if you just break it down, I mean, how would AI be used in a restorative justice context and in practice? I mean, the way I've done it is either mediation, a circle, and conferencing. How would you go? Just something very simple. If you just explain to me, how would AI be used for a case? How would you do that?
Okay, so it's hard. It makes me think of, Henry Ford, when he asked consumers what they wanted, they said faster horses, right? So it's actually hard for me to answer this question, but I like thinking about it, right? So what can AI do? Well, AI is essentially machine learning. So the machine can learn things, and it can process things in a manner that is much more akin to human thought than anything we've done before. And it's getting better and better at that as time goes on. It's improving on an exponential curve, right? So in terms of, what can AI do? Well, it can certainly generate documents quickly. So one of the impediments, one of the major stalling points for legal processes is the formality of generating documents. And so if we are able to have the machine, the artificial intelligence, do the pieces of the legal proceeding that are more kind of formalistic, then we're able to free humans. Like the utopian vision of AI. I mean, people have a lot of sort of dystopian visions of AI, but the utopian vision of AI is that we get the machines to do all the boring stuff, to do all the stuff that is pedantic, to do all of the things that are not about bringing people together. So there is this really radical potential for AI to be used to pivot the work that lawyers do, or non-lawyers, or anybody, social workers, people engaged in processes of conflict resolution, to really delegate a lot of the formalistic pieces of that to the artificial intelligence, and let the machines do that, and then we can have the interpersonal communication happen in a more effective way. Kind of what Neil Christie is talking about in terms of giving people back their conflicts and using technology to support that, right? So that's at a high level, like in terms of abstraction. At a low level, what can AI do? Well, you could simulate. So for example, people could practice conflict resolution. So it could be used in training. So when you do conflict resolution training, you could have a very simple, artificial intelligence kind of interaction where a young person who's learning about conflict resolution, or somebody who's engaging in process of conflict resolution, could practice, dialoguing that way. There can also be tremendous amounts of data can be brought together by AI very quickly. So with statistical analysis or even qualitative analysis, and there's a lot of knowledge that can be brought together. So if you need to, look things up, AI can support having informed guidance and doing research. So there's a lot more potential for people to do things instantaneously rather than delaying. And so that consultation about information can be helpful too. So again, those are just some possible uses of artificial intelligence. You could also have artificial intelligence, be one of the people, or one of the entities, because it's not really a person, but one of the entities in that circle, in that conversation. You can have artificial intelligence used to sort of cross-reference and think through ideas, and in some ways, not necessarily replacing a human mediator, but there are online dispute resolution mechanisms that use artificial intelligence, and I haven't heard of one that is actually an attempt for restorative justice to use a computerized or non-human practitioner to support the dialogue or the conversation between people. So there's lots of different potentialities, and it's actually hard to envision them all. But it's interesting to think through. I mean, the thing is, when we look at the constraints we have, so for example, when you look at a northern population or a northern place like Nunavut, or I've also, spent time in Kenya as well, in some of the, more rural areas, you don't necessarily have professionals on the ground, right? So bringing that professional type of expertise, or and professional can sound bad when we talk about restorative justice, but bringing the trained individual, bringing the training, right, to the participants, enabling them to be supported in that interaction. There's lots of different ways that we can use artificial intelligence to do that.
That's brilliant. And I can see the benefit, especially, when you spoke about processing documents and, the material and, data and all sorts of stuff that do take a lot of time. And as a lawyer, I think you have a very good experience of, sometimes justice delays, justice denies, isn't it? And I think that I can see the value in doing that. My challenge, and this is was my first worry when I saw AI and restorative justice, because restorative justice by default, by definition, is a very human-centered method, right? So it's all about us. It's about you and me. It's about our connection. It's about Ubuntu. It's about that different dimension of relationship that we kind of try to restore by what brings us together as human beings, and then just suddenly throwing into there, the mix, an artificial intelligence entity. It I was like, is this an oxymoron? Is it like, so I was relieved when you said it won't be replacing the facilitator or the mediator. But let's say that, you spoke about translation, you spoke about accessing, the material and the language. How safe do you think, given the fact that, when you practice restorative justice, you see most of its power is in the words, is in the way we say things, is in the way we speak to each other, and the tears and the touching and the emotion are involved. And when you use AI and you translate those things into, text or I don't know, spoken language that is by this AI entity, don't you think something will kind of get lost in translation there, and we kind of take away this power of restorative justice in bringing people together through that human-centered approach?
Well, I do think AI and technologies are dangerous. I am wary of that. I want to say a couple things about that. One, just to support what you're saying and agree completely. This is one of the things that draws me to restorative justice, is in the context of working in the legal profession and working as a Crown attorney. I have very rarely seen people actually cry in open court. So it's this very unemotional process. But when I have done sentencing circles, when I was a volunteer member in Kingston many years ago, in Kingston, Ontario, Canada, with youth in sentencing circles, people cry all the time. You know how it is, like people's emotion comes out, and that processing of emotion and that sort of cathartic moment that people maybe want from a courtroom, but they don't get there, that people are brought together in that process. And so I wanted to sort of bring those two ideas together and think about how, a pencil's a technology. A typewriter is a technology. The printing press is a technology. We're already using all kinds of technologies that, in fact, don't bring us together. In fact, we are separated. I think, you could write a poem about how in the legal profession, we are sliced apart by paper, right? We just have all these reams and reams of paper. And is there a way, I want to ask the question because I don't know the answer, but the question is powerful, right? How can we use the power of technology to bring people together, right? Especially in the context I'm thinking from, especially in the context of people who are very far apart. And in the context of intergenerational trauma, in the context of, a need for healing, and there's different contexts around the world like that, but with, Canada's residential school history and the, our report of our Truth and Reconciliation Commission in 2015, we have a legacy of a cultural genocide, and we have a place where there's a report from about child protection in the Nunavut Territory from 2023, and it's dismal circumstance. So we have ongoing problems. So maybe technology can help. And one of the things that made me think of this is the fastest adopters and the most common users of Facebook in Canada are people in the Nunavut Territory. They love technology. They are really excited about adopting technology, and you can see why. They're very isolated from one another, and they're in a very marginal environment, which is also a very beautiful environment. So I guess what I'm saying is, I haven't fully formed, an argument for exactly how to use AI in respect of restorative justice processes, but it doesn't have to be antithetical to human interaction. In fact, I would really problematize the exceptionalization of contemporary high levels of technology from the other series of technology that we have been using for hundreds of years now. Technology can certainly be an impediment to human personal communication, but it already is.
Yeah, and I think with every innovation, there's risks involved, and I think it's just being clear about those risks, I guess, and making sure that whatever is created takes into account the strengths of whatever we're using, like on this occasion, restorative justice. And you mentioned a word that there's a webinar actually on it, catharsis and cathartic moment, and I spoke about this restorative pain that needs to be present through the restorative justice process to then cleanse yourself and then come out of it stronger and healed. But that is not an easy thing to do, and that's why I say that courts are kind of the sausage machine of the criminal justice. I think it's just been processed as opposed to actually going through a very painful process. And I understand what you're saying about technology being used in the right way. It is a tool, and I guess like every tool, even the remote control, is how we use it, isn't it? We can be for our benefit, it can be used against us. So final question is, this sounds very, very exciting, fascinating, and very timely. What's the next step? I mean, how do we take this forward now? How do you think people can come together, start talking about it, writing, and then what does it look like? Do you think there'll be an application, or what does that look like? I mean, what's the next step?
Well, I think this is nascent, and that's what makes it exciting, and also, less useful without further thought and elaboration. And I think this requires intelligent humans to actually think about it. People who have a variety of different interdisciplinary backgrounds to think about what are the ways that technology can be infused, and uses of artificial intelligence in particular, how can that be infused into the ways in which we conduct restorative justice processes? Because the thing is too, we want to get ahead of that because it's going to happen anyway, right? Thinking through how much online dispute resolution happens, for example, and how much online dispute resolution, like if you are on, the Alibaba site, if you're on Amazon site, you're going to have like a chat with a bot to try to resolve disputes, right? So how do we intervene in that to ensure that, these things are done in a humanistic way? And so I would want, in my vision of this, I would love to see people writing about this and thinking about this. And I think the Restorative Justice for All Institute is the right venue globally for people to be thinking about this and writing about this. And I'd like us to think about it together and there to be a publication about it. I think that we could really draw from a lot of interesting different subject matters, and restorative justice doesn't, it is a very grassroots ethos, as you say, but it's also one that can, in a world where we're able to connect globally, we can bring that principle of local interaction and that ability for people to connect on a personal level. We can bring it into a space where it's supported by and infused with technology. And again, I just want to caution that if we don't do this, it's going to happen to us, right? So we want to get ahead of it.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant, and I would love to invite you to be a guest editor of a special issue of the Internet Journal of Restorative Justice that we publish, and then open it up to see who would like to contribute to this, I think, very jazzy idea, but very timely, I think, for the movement. There's also these discussions about online practice and standards, because I think as you do more virtual restorative justice virtual meetings, I think the challenges and the standards should be adapted to that virtual environment. And I think this conversation, it links with that as well. And how do we practice? Yes. How do we practice virtual restorative justice? You know, how do we do it safely for people? What sort of things we need to be looking at, and how does AI can help us identify those things? But at the same time, how do we use AI safely, as you said, and use the remote control for our benefit and not the other way around? So thank you ever so much again, Rebecca. It's so good to connect with you again. It was brilliant to see you in December as well in London at our 10th anniversary. So thank you for coming, because we've been speaking for so many years, but I've never actually met. So it was good to see you in person. But yeah, no, thank you once again. And look forward to having the issue.
That's going to be amazing, and I'm really excited about reading what people are thinking and encouraging people to think about this. So thanks so much, and congratulations on 10 years of really magnificent, innovative work. That's amazing.